Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we'll be discussing the Toronto Raptors' victory over the Atlanta Hawks, but before we do that, we've got to talk more trade deadline, because the trade deadline is rapidly approaching, and the Toronto Raptors are apparently active on the trade market, looking to upgrade the team for the future. And much of the speculation surrounding the team has been as a facilitator, as a team that is going to help grease the wheels within the NBA and be rewarded for doing so. And when people say greasing the wheels, it means fixing financial aspects of different teams in return for picks and prospects. And this is something that other teams have done to great success. Notably, the Oklahoma City Thunder was a very poor team for a while, and in that interim period before they became a very good team, they took on excess salary in exchange for picks and prospects. And that's kind of where the Toronto Raptors find themselves today. They have veteran players on their team that are probably pretty coveted, and they also have something that is in incredibly short supply, which is money. They have the ability to take on salaries, and there's actually a very interesting article that was written by Michael Grange yesterday and is a very good think piece for people who are interested in the inner workings of the NBA. And as he details in the article, many of the executives around the league are telling him that one of the biggest things to look out for are the financials of a deal, and that financials and the books in the new CBA are probably the most important thing in terms of trades these days. I think in the past, in more lenient CBAs, collective bargaining agreements, that talent ruled the day, and that if you could make a trade work from a talent standpoint, then you would probably go over the tax, take on the financial burden of making it happen. But the new CBA is extremely onerous, with a ton of complicating factors, the different aprons, the rules that apply to those teams, that you can get hard capped in certain situations. And as a result, teams have found it a lot more difficult to work around. And they have had, there are some contracts, legacy contracts that were signed prior to the new CBA that are looking pretty bad in light of the new CBA. And a lot of the deals that may be made in the future could be to fix those financial situations so that they can create winning scenarios for their teams. So when you look at it from that perspective, it kind of gets the juices flowing, and you might have to start thinking and looking and examining trades based more on financial implications. And one of the things that he details in the article is the tax. And the tax has existed for a while now. If you go too far over the salary cap, even in the past CBAs, you would be punished by the league. They would take the amount that you went over the luxury tax threshold, and then it would be multiplied by a certain amount. And then you would have to give that to the league, and it would be redistributed to the teams that were under the tax. It was a way of sort of paying the teams that weren't up to that level yet. And that's kind of been ramped up. So there's a second apron, there's all sorts of stuff that really is punitive to teams that are over that threshold. He lists one of the teams in here, and he says this isn't based on any reporting, this is just kind of him looking at the books and thinking to himself, the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the Minnesota Timberwolves are into the tax this season. They're one of the highest taxed teams. And he was saying that essentially they're going to be looking to move some of these bigger contracts. And one such contract that they could be looking to move, Mike Conley, and he has $10 million on the books for next season. And they would have to pay to get him off the books, as he mentions in the article. So what I thought is that that could be an interesting idea for a trade. And the deal that I came up with, because he lists the that they maybe could pair him with Leonard Miller in order to trade for an expiring contract. Unfortunately, that the way that it works is that if you were a second apron team, you can't consolidate two contracts together and ship them out for one contract. That's one of the stipulations of being in the second apron, is that you can't consolidate two contracts together of players who are on the team. But what you can do is you can add draft capital to a trade. So the proposed trade that I came up with for the Toronto Raptors to, help out the Timberwolves from their financial hellscape would be to trade Davion Mitchell for Mike Conley and Minnesota's first round pick next season. So if it is true that, finances rule the day and that they are looking to escape this self-created hell on the books, they might be looking at something like this, where they have to give up draft capital. And Mike Conley is a guy who's no longer a big-time contributor. Of course, he's a vet and he has uses, but he's not a huge impact player. So what I was thinking is that Davion Mitchell plays the same position. He's a much better defender. He's a quasi-rotational player. He could help their defense, which definitely needs help at this point, and fill the kind of hole that they have at point guard, at least for this season. And then they could get off Mike Conley's contract for next year. And as a result, they would be paying a first to get off of that contract. And this is one of those deals where you look at it and you say, hell no. I mean, Davion Mitchell is definitely not worth a first-round pick. This is pie in the sky. This is a dream. What are you thinking? But if you believe Michael Grange and you say to yourself, well, it's about finances now. Should be evaluated in terms of that. Well, what are the Raptors giving up? They are giving up the cap space for next season. They are taking on $10 million of Mike Conley's contract and help them lower their tax bill. Because as he mentions in the article, Minnesota is not a major market that could, withstand a huge tax bill if they're not going to be one of the best teams in the league. They're not really looking like championship caliber material this season, so a tax bill is going to be pretty tough to swallow, especially for next season as well. They're going to be pretty financially under the gun. So this is a kind of trade that maybe would not be possible under the last CBA, might be possible this season. And obviously, as a Toronto Raptor fan, being able to convert Davion Mitchell, a guy you got essentially for free, you got kind of paid to take him on this season, would be a dream. That would be unbelievable. And who knows, maybe it's possible now. Am I dreaming? Let me know in the comments. Also, another lingering big trade that they could be involved in and help grease the wheels on, which is obviously the Jimmy Butler trade. Wherever he goes, there's going to be some stuff that needs to happen from a facilitating standpoint. So it should be interesting in the coming days and weeks to see what the Toronto Raptors are able to spin this cap space and these contracts into. And if you haven't already, I suggest reading the Michael Grange article. It is very informative, very interesting, gives you some insight on what is happening within the league and the different trends and how the CBA has impacted everything. Why don't we move past the trade discussions and get into something that's kind of interesting, but also kind of bad, which is the Toronto Raptors winning again yesterday against the Atlanta Hawks. And this is another reason that perhaps the Toronto Raptors should be looking to make a trade to get rid of some of their veterans, because the veterans are starting to help them win games. So why don't we get into the player evaluations right now, and we'll get right into it again. No surprise who the best player was last night. Scotty Barnes had a really great night. 25 points on 17 shots, 1 of 2 from 3, 8 of 10 from the free throw line. So that was a big thing last night. The Hawks are a small team. They have one guy on the roster who's like a true center, and that is Clint Capella, but he's old and he's injured a lot, and he didn't play last night. So they were relying on small ball lineups and playing Okongwu at center. And Okongwu is a decent young big, but he is not a true 7-footer, and he's not really a rim protector per se. He can protect the rim a little bit, but they are a small team. Let's just put it that way. And for long stretches of the game, especially when Okongwu was out, the Hawks were just playing small ball, and Scotty Barnes really punished them. And he did such a good job last night of understanding the process of what you have to do to beat that kind of team. And what it is you got to play bully ball. You got to get inside. You got to finish through contact, get the smaller guys under the basket, move them out of the way with your big body, and then just put them in the basket. And he did that over and over and over again, and he got to the foul line as a result. They couldn't really stop him without fouling him, so they did foul him. And he had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and only 1 turnover, and played excellent defense again. The guy is putting it all together. He played almost 40 minutes that night. He was probably the best player in the whole game, even with the Atlanta Hawks. Just really wonderful performance. The assists are kind of going down a little bit, I've noticed. I think he's playing off the ball a little bit more, playing more as a big, and I've said in the past that he should be kind of splitting duties between those two roles where he handles the ball, but also like just get into that comfort zone in the mid post where he has been so deadly. The turnaround jump shot has been on for him. He's able to operate in there. He can explode to the basket in that area, use his body more effectively. He just looks a little bit more natural down there, and I think it complements him to be able to play that role a little bit more often. And another thing from Scotty Barnes from last night was the fact that he was clutch. He had a really good understanding of what to do when the game started getting tight. He really imposed his will on the game. He hit a pull-up three in transition. Normally that shot, not very good for him. He made it anyway. He hit some free throws late in the game. And then on one of the penultimate play for the Hawks, they had a long time to go up on the Toronto Raptors, and the Raptors had to play really good defense. And one of the elements of that was Scotty Barnes protecting the rim. The Hawks drove into the paint desperately because the shot clock was winding down, and it looked like they were going to get a layup. Scotty Barnes rotated over from the middle of the paint to cut off the basket along the baseline and swatted a shot attempt at the rim that no doubt saved the Toronto Raptors from losing the game. If that had gone in, the Hawks would have gone up by one, and they wouldn't have been in a position, they wouldn't have had to foul, and it would have just been seconds left. So it was certainly a game-saving block from Scotty Barnes, and he pushed all the right buttons on offense as well to carry the Toronto Raptors across the finish line. Great performance from him in the clutch. Number 2 on this list, and he's back to number 2 because last game he had a pretty bad, probably one of his worst games of the season, so he came in last in the starting lineup, but he's back to his normal spot. Number 2, Jakob Poeltl had a really good game, 17 points in 28 minutes. He was 7 of 10 from the field. He hit 3 free throws, 2 of them game-winning free throws, I might add. They fouled him at the end of the game because he got the rebound. After Scotty Barnes got the block, he got the rebound, and the Hawks smartly fouled him to send him to the line with only a couple of seconds remaining. And Jakob Poeltl's like a 62% free throw shooter, so chances were that he would make one and miss one, and then the Hawks would have either a chance to tie or take the lead with a 2 or a 3. But he hit both of them, and that basically forced the Hawks to have to hit a 3, which changes the game completely. So that was like a huge moment for the Raptors, and it changed the inbound strategy completely because the Hawks burned 5 seconds on the first inbound attempt. They had to call a timeout. After the timeout, they got the ball in, but it was not an ideal shot, and I think it was Okongwu who had to jack up a 3, and it wasn't even close. So Jakob Poeltl also making winning plays in the clutch, that big rebound, and also the free throws, that was huge. So yeah, Jakob Poeltl had a great game. 17 points, 9 rebounds, 3 offensive, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 3 turnovers. I'm not going to say amazing defense, but decent defense. And he just did a lot of really good stuff this game. He was able to rest because they don't need him to play like in the high 30 minutes because Kelly Olynyk is playing really well, so they can rest him a little bit, gives him a different look. I think he had a really effective game, and I thought he was the second best player on the team, or second best player in the starting lineup, let's put it that way, because there were some guys off the bench who played really well too. But yeah, he had a really good game, being able to bounce back after that really kind of rotten game the other night. Next up, let's go to Grady Dick. Grady Dick had a great game. He's starting to turn it back on. His 3-point shot is still kind of iffy. Anything above the break looks kind of difficult for him at this point, but he had 15 points on 10 shots. He was 1 of 5 from 3, 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 4 turnovers, and that was a problem for almost everybody because of the Hawks' defensive strategy, and they also have Dyson Daniels, who's like, God, that guy is a menace on defense. But anyway, Grady Dick had it going, and not from 3. He was cutting all over the place. Especially when the Hawks are small, especially when they don't have good rim protection. The Raptors' cut game was really punishing the Hawks last night, and Grady Dick was a big part of that. Many, many very nice cuts to the rim, more dunks This guy is dunking all over the place. I love to see that. He still gets hung up on screens, and that's what the Hawks were kind of trying to do. They were trying to target Grady quite a bit, especially using screens, especially using their shooters like Veit Krejci and Garrison Matthews. They would run them through screens, and Grady would have to go under the screens. That's a new development, and I think it's a concession. I think this is something that the coaching staff is kind of like saying, okay, well, Grady is having a tough time with these screens. Just let him go under the screens. They're finally letting him go under the screens, because we used to see that he would have to go over the screens. He'd be in the trailing position. It would be that pick and roll threat where Jakob Poeltl or whoever the big was in that pick and roll would have to guard two players, and then it was a pick your poison. Maybe they would have to rotate a third player over to cut off the penetration, pick up a player, and then it was the defense was in rotation. However, I mean, the bad thing about going under the screen is that you give up an open three-point shot, but a lot of the time it's an off the dribble three, and most of the time it's above the break, right? Because usually you run a pick and roll at the top of the arc or near the top of the arc or on one of the wings. So that is an above the break three if you go under the screen. And I like this new strategy. I think having Grady Dick go under the screen, it's just, maybe that is just a concession that you got to make when he's playing major minutes. Maybe that is the bitter pill to swallow rather than going into that situation where he's trailing the play, because that is how teams have burned the Raptors so many times when he's on the floor. So kind of like that development. Of course, they made a couple of threes above the break, but it changes the defensive scheme, and maybe they should incorporate it a little bit more often. But in terms of offense, I just thought he did a really good job of getting to his spots, taking guys off of the dribble when they closed out too hard, cutting, making good passes. I think his passing was good. The turnovers were an issue, but they were an issue for everybody, and they were really kind of a scheme thing for the Hawks. That's kind of what they're hanging their hat on. They want to turn you over a lot. We saw that with the Raptors a couple of seasons ago. That's kind of how their defense works, and no surprise. I mean, it's a similar situation with the Hawks. When you don't have rim protection, you got to get stops other ways. And the other ways you do that is with steals and deflections, and that's kind of what the Hawks are trying to do. So no surprise there. I think the starting lineup played well. It's hard to pick the third guy, because I think if you look at the box score, it's hard to deny that RJ Barrett had a good scoring night, even though he did have 5 turnovers. Let's just give it to him, but I think that there's an argument to be made for Davion Mitchell being the 4th best guy. But let's give it to RJ here. He had 15 points and 6 of 9 shooting. He was 3 of 3 from 3. Amazing, especially in the 4th quarter. He splashed a really important 3 that put the Raptors back up, because the Hawks made a run in the 4th quarter that let them take the lead, and it looked like all the work that the Raptors did throughout the game just sort of fell through their fingers, and they were going to lose the game. A lot of clutch buckets happened, and RJ was part of that. He hit a 3 that put the Toronto Raptors up, and he had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 5 turnovers, and that was another issue. So his defense wasn't very good, especially on Dyson Daniels, who had kind of an incredible night, had 22 points. And then when RJ was handling the ball, I mean, he did score on Dyson Daniels a couple of times. He had a nice spin move in traffic where he was able to finish around Dyson Daniels, but Dyson Daniels turned RJ over a couple of times, and RJ turned it over 5 times. And this is kind of what the Hawks do. And they put pressure on your ball handler, and they make you make mistakes. They get in the passing lane. Sometimes maybe they'll give up a bucket if they think that they can get a steal, that kind of stuff. So yeah, RJ was one of the guys who fell victim to that. And it really, like, looking backwards, that makes Scotty Barnes' single turnover this game that much more impressive, because almost everybody else had like a ton of turnovers, especially in the starting lineup. Jakob Poeltl had 3, RJ Barrett had 5, Grady Dick had 4, Davion Mitchell had 2. Yeah, I think it was an okay game apart from that. I mean, the clutch buckets were big. He did the thing where he scores throughout all the different quarters and then came up big at the end. I think he had an okay game, but I think it was enough to win the game. So, you know, I'll take it, I guess. Next up, Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell only had 2 points this game. He was 1 of 3 from 3. He had 1 rebound, 7 assists, which is good. 2 turnovers, so 7 assists, 2 turnovers is fine. Didn't really contribute on offense, but let me tell you this. For most of the game, you did not see a lot from Trae Young. The Raptors bottled up Trae Young. Guess why? Okay, the Raptors have the mega annoying duo of Davion Mitchell and Jamal Shead just pestering this guy and keeping a lid on him. And Davion Mitchell did a fantastic job of being a menace and staying attached to Trae Young and wrapping him up. And that's what he does. He is an excellent defender. And let me just say this. The Raptors are winning games, okay? No Emmanuel Quickley. Why? Because the starting lineup makes sense. And this is something that I talked about in the past, over the past couple of weeks. He adds the balance, the sort of yin to the yang of Grady Dick and RJ Barrett. You got to have other guys who are willing to do the other stuff. And guess who that is? That is Davion Mitchell. The guy has, been a sneaky good role player for the Toronto Raptors, especially if you're only looking at the stat line. Single game plus minus usually does not mean anything. It's very noisy, and you can get wild stuff that doesn't make any sense. But he was plus 17. He had the highest plus minus on the team. So again, it doesn't really matter. But we'll just mention it anyway, because sometimes it's good for agendas. And then we'll go to the bench. The vets, these guys are playing too good. We got to get them off the team so that the Toronto Raptors can tank again. We'll start with Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown was awesome. 18 points in 20 minutes, okay? 8 of 12 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, 1 free throw, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 2 turnovers. He's back. He is back. He's been awesome in his past 3 games. The guy is balling. He's making me eat crow. I don't know. He was horrible. Absolutely horrible in his first couple of games. I know he was coming back from an injury. It wasn't that he didn't look right. Like, he was moving pretty well. He had a really good first game back, and then he sucked. But he has developed a chemistry with Kelly Olynyk. Kelly Olynyk is like the bargainist of bargain bin Nikola Jokic's, a big who can pass. So maybe that's what it is that he's found his partner in crime in Kelly Olynyk, because their synergy is off the charts these days. They're really driving the Toronto Raptors off of the bench, and especially with the cuts. So he is so good at finding the seams in the defense. And his floater was going in last night. And I said that was the worst shot in the NBA online recently, because he was like shooting so poorly from there. Even that was going in last night. So I had nothing to pick at him about. He was playing really, 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 really well. And maybe this will boost his stock come the trade deadline. Maybe the Raptors can get a little bit more for him than I was anticipating. So good for you, Bruce Brown, the Cowboy. He's back. He's wrangling up some points right now. Next up, we'll actually go to Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher, we know how he plays at this point. We all know he's going to go on a couple of weeks where he looks like Quebecois Kevin Durant, and then the next couple of games, he's going to look like a scrub. And it's just going to kind of oscillate between those two extremes. And that's just who he is as a player. He's back to Quebecois Kevin Durant. 17 points on 7 of 10 shooting, 2 of 4 from 3, 1 of 2 from the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 turnover. Chris Boucher did a really good job spinning off of one of the Hawks who tried to come at him and steal the ball. He doesn't turn the ball over that often. A really productive night. His defense is still, like, he doesn't really know where to be. There was a couple situations on defense where he was making mistakes and whatnot, but I'll take it. And another good thing about having Kelly and Bruce off of the bench is that the Raptors are not relying on Chris Boucher to have a good night in order to have a good bench performance. He can have bad nights where you just say, yeah, he doesn't have it, and then he doesn't have to take a million shots. But when he is on, you have Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk and a really productive Chris Boucher. So yeah, the Raptors bench is now a strength. It's pretty crazy. We went from one of the worst benches in the league to like actually a pretty solid bench. And lastly, we'll talk about Kelly Olynyk. Played 14 minutes, so not a ton of minutes, because unlike the last game, Jakob Poeltl didn't have a nightmare performance. But still, Kelly Olynyk is still being very productive off of the bench. 11 points on 3 of 4 shooting. He was 1 of 2 from 3. He hit 4 free throws. His defense is actually, my goodness, like, he is finally looking right. And he's putting up resistance at the rim and using all of those really crafty veteran moves to swipe at the ball. And like, he pushes players when the refs aren't looking, does all that really sneaky stuff that if you were on another team, you would absolutely despise. 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover. Great game. Awesome game from Kelly Olynyk. I'll mention Jamal Shed. 2 points on 1 of 4 shooting, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 0 turnovers, but played really good defense. If I'm going to give Davion Mitchell flowers for playing good defense on guys like Trae Young, I'm going to give Jamal Shead flowers as well, because even though he didn't bring it on offense last night, he did bring it on the defensive end, and he was one of the reasons that Trae Young didn't have a very good night last night. But yeah, last night was like sort of from beginning to end, the Raptors played hard, and although the game kind of slipped away from them in the fourth quarter, it was more that the Hawks were playing better, because the Hawks started off the game miserably. They looked like they didn't give an S, and the Raptors looked like they did give an S. They were playing very tight on offense, making the right pass, and of course the Hawks picked them off and turned them over a bunch of times, but that was a lot in the second half. But also when they weren't picking them off, the Raptors were making the right play and attacking the rim. And then on the defensive end, they kind of cut the head off of the snake. They made sure that Trae Young didn't get it going and didn't have the ball a lot. And the Hawks really struggled to create in the half court without Trae Young. And then when they made it a game and they took the lead, I was like, oh God, I've seen this before. Raptors blow it in the fourth quarter. They let a team come back and kind of steal their lunch money. Didn't happen this game because the Toronto Raptors executed. And it helps that they have veterans that aren't garbage. Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown, even Chris Boucher, and also you got to include Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, Davion Mitchell into the conversation there. Even, and RJ Barrett. Like, these guys have been around the block, and they know how to, eke out a close win. This team has won 4 of their past 5 games. So the tank is not looking very healthy right now. And I did say Too Good to Tank 2.0 is back, and it looks like it's for real this time. The Toronto Raptors should really think about expediting the trade the veterans process, because it looks like they are contributing to wins. Kelly Olynyk, Chris Boucher, Bruce Brown, Davion Mitchell. I'm not going to say Jakob Poeltl. It looks like maybe they're going to try and keep him around, but all of these guys I think might be looking at being relocated, so the Raptors can go back to losing games. But this is kind of a nice little reprieve in the middle of the season. I mean, your heart is torn here. You obviously want Cooper Flagg, but at the same time, watching these guys win games, beat teams, it's fun to watch. I'm not complaining when I'm watching the game. It's only the kind of regret that creeps back in after you look at the reverse standings on Tankathon. Do you realize that maybe this isn't the greatest idea? But next up, the Toronto Raptors, as I mentioned, they're playing a kind of like doubling up on the Hawks. They're still in Atlanta tomorrow night. They play the Hawks again at 7:30. I don't think that the Hawks are going to come out as lackadaisically as they did this past game. I think they kind of got shell-shocked by the Raptors, who looked a lot more competent than I think they were expecting. When you see a team with a road record as like tragic as the Toronto Raptors, you're thinking this is going to be a cakewalk, and it was not. They came out of the gates with a purpose and with a plan, and they really made the Hawks look silly, especially in the first half. So I think the Hawks are going to kind of regroup, and we'll see what the Raptors are able to do against them in the next game. Should be interesting to watch. But yeah, that's the episode. Let me know what you think of the trades that I proposed. I know that a lot of the time this does not follow with what the league has been known to do. A lot of the time it's about talent, and you see these names with first round picks coming back and you're like, this doesn't make sense. Something seems off in your brain. But if you read the Michael Grange article, maybe it's not as crazy as it might seem. So that would be pretty cool if the Raptors could get some first round picks back for some of these veterans on expirings. And do you guys have any trades of your own? Please share them in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Raptors fans. It is very fun to answer your questions and read your comments, so please keep doing that. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell icon, do all of that good stuff. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.